he's the white boy.
Laurie Penny wrote an article a few days ago called "I'm with the Band," BANNED. So I appreciate puns. In it, she talks about Milo, she talks about trolling, she talks about political discourse, and so on. And I think she just doesn't quite get it. She sails fairly close to self-awareness when talking about Rouge V, but never quite actually gets there. Now, it's kind of painful to me to talk about Laurie and her attitudes and things, because we used to get on. We used to trade remarks and insights and stuff over social media. I've got friends who are friends with her. I first encountered her via Warren Ellis, who was talking about her journalism and so on. And back then, she wasn't the kind of loony that she seems to have become now, unfortunately, because she has the same regard for me, it seems. But it's just disappointing, because I think she just doesn't get a lot of things. Despite being similar age to me, having a similar experience of the way that the internet has grown up and changed things. So it's frustrating to see someone get it so completely wrong. So I'm going to address the article. I'm just going to take snippets from it rather than read the whole thing. And I'm going to reply to those snippets with where I think she's going wrong. I don't expect her to listen to this, but maybe someone else will. What's unfortunate is that I can't have these conversations with people like Laurie. I don't expect to talk to Laurie herself. She's got too high a profile now, and I'm just some shitbird game designer and writer who likes to opine on politics and things. But it's unfortunate. I would like to have these conversations with people. I mean, the other day I had an hour-and-a-half conversation with a white supremacist. Someone completely on the opposite side of the political spectrum to me, with the opposite views about pretty much everything. And yet we managed to have a reasonably cordial conversation, listen to each other's points, even though we didn't agree on anything. You know, have a decent, respectful back and forth with someone whose politics I loathe. And yet I can't have those same kind of conversations with people who are supposedly on the same side of the political spectrum as me. And that's sad. Anyway, let's go on with the article, and you'll note I chose a flattering picture of Laurie, not a still from her picking her nose, so surely I earned some points for that. This is a story about how trolls took the wheel of the clown car of modern politics. It's a story about the insider traders of the attention economy. It's a story about fear and loathing and Donald Trump and you and me. It's not a story about Milo Yiannopoulos, the professional alt-right provocateur who was just banned from Twitter permanently for sending racist abuse to actor Leslie Jones. Turns out a great deal of the story is about Milo, but using him as a vehicle to talk about these things. But fear and loathing is obviously a reference to Hunter S. Thompson, and it's worth mentioning here that Laurie isn't Hunter S. Thompson. Nobody is Hunter S. Thompson. But a great many people in media seem to want to be Hunter S. Thompson these days. It's all about the gonzo. It's all about putting the emotion and the spin onto it. Now, when Hunter S. Thompson did it, it was revolutionary because it was different to everything else. You know, it wasn't just the facts. But it's now getting to the point where getting just the facts is difficult. Being a factual reporter would be revolutionary in the current media climate. So that's what we need, Laurie. We need objective, rational, truth-oriented reporting, not more gonzo, I'm afraid. I'm sorry to say. I think it's also important to bring you up on the fact that Milo did not send any racist abuse. Milo may be many things, and I don't like him at all. I just agree with him on a few key points, but he did not send any racist abuse, so let's not accuse people of things they haven't done. Since that day, there is absolutely nothing I have been able to say to Milo to persuade him that we are not friends. The more famous he gets off the back of extravagantly abusing women and minorities, the more I tell him I hate him and everything he stands for. The more he laughs and asks when we're drinking. I'm a radical, queer, feminist, leftist writer burdened with actual principles. He thinks that's funny and invites me to his parties. It is funny, for a number of reasons. Firstly, as all those things you said, you are the eternal straight man to a string of trolls. You're the butt of jokes because you cannot let loose and just have fun with something or enjoy it. You know, for all his many faults, I think Milo understands that you can let things go and just have fun. And, you know, we're having disagreements. It doesn't mean you have to hate each other. Whereas you and a lot of people like you don't seem able to let that go. You believe that you should emotionally and viscerally hate the person. So you hate the sinner along with the sin, to put it in a Christian context. And that's basically your problem. And many of your views are jokes. I mean, when he says something horrible about feminism, you take it as a crack against women. That's a category error. That's why this keeps happening. And why you provide endless fodder for people. Team Milo consists of his tour manager, Tim, one Breitbart writer, one pretty young man with a neat beard and a dangerous faggot band t-shirt, and Milo's personal trainer and driver, who's the sort of American jock I'd considered largely fictional. The gang kills time by asking if I'd rather shag Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage. I accuse them of psychic violence, which is a joke, although I also mean it. Well, see, there's a problem right there. Even the word violence has become so utterly devalued that asking an obviously provocative question, it can conceivably be seen as that by someone like you. And you even say, I answer back as a joke, but I also mean it. Words, how are they violence? I mean, I guess if you scream right in someone's ear and loud enough to burst an eardrum, I guess then words are violence. But other than that, people seriously contend that asking that kind of question is violence, and you even kind of half and half on it. How absurd is that? Just as we set off, news breaks that Milo has been suspended from Twitter. A frenzy of jubilant activity. This is a huge win for Milo and his brand. He'll be trending worldwide within the hour. So then, I have to ask, why keep pushing for more censorship? Why keep pushing for more bias? I'm not a conservative. I don't like Milo, but I will fight for his right to speak. And lots of other people will as well who don't agree with him. And every time you do this kind of thing, you do end up giving him more publicity. You do end up pushing more people to listen to him because it's forbidden fruit. He did nothing actually wrong at all. And yet that's enough to get him banned. That's unfair. There are genuine, serious free expression problems on social media. The public square is now privately owned, and that is a huge problem. Maybe not so much for you if you happen to agree with them on whatever point is being made at the time, but you're reasonably sex positive, Laurie. There are sex workers, there are adult performers and so on being censored and hurt because of this kind of thing on social media. It's not just right-wing provocateurs like Milo getting in trouble. It's all kinds of people. So how can you stand by? You should be defending him. If you call yourself a liberal and you mean it, you should be defending Milo's right to free speech. Because as you can see, even if you disagree with what he says, going after him just makes him stronger. So what's the point? Unless he actually breaks a rule. Why do it? Why feed him? Why feed the troll? And this is the question of our times, I think. At least as why feed the troll? Why do it? Everyone knows it's a bad idea. Everyone knows it doesn't work. Why persist? Milo shows no remorse for the avalanche of misconduct he helped direct towards Leslie Jones, who was just the latest victim of the recreational ritual abuse he likes to launch at women and minorities for the fame and fun of it. According to the law of the wild web, the spoils go to those with the fewest fucks to give. I've come to believe, in the course of our bizarro unfriendship, that Milo believes in almost nothing concrete, not even in free speech. The same is reportedly true of Trump, of people like Ann Coulter, of Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. They are pure antagonists, unencumbered by any conviction, apart from their personal entitlement to raw power and stacks of cash. Here's the thing. That doesn't matter. The people they're tapping into, they have conviction. Their concerns and their problems are real, and they're not being served elsewhere. The liberal left has abandoned a lot of its principles and a lot of people, and if a demagogue comes along and expresses those concerns, they're going to go where it is. I was involved in Gamergate since before it was Gamergate, and when Milo came along, I was fairly certain, and I believe I said so several times, that this was an attempt to exploit this, but that Gamergate could in turn use him. Why has Milo gotten such currency with a mass of left liberal gamers? How on earth did a conservative pundit manage to curry favour with a group that is politically largely antagonistic towards his point of view? Because he expressed points about free expression. Because he took the claims seriously, and they were true. Breitbart jumped on this opportunity, publicised things in a way the rest of the media wouldn't touch, that were true. There was corruption, there was advertising that was hidden, there was a lack of declarations of conflicts of interest. Nobody appeared to give a fuck because it was games, and people think they're frivolous even though they make a huge, huge amount of money, and instead jumped on the harassment narrative. And we're now at a point where that harassment narrative is used as marketing. Objections to Ghostbusters were founded on many, many different degrees, not just the bare thin paucity of the premise of Rule 63 Ghostbusters, but the objections and the criticism were rejected on the grounds of misogyny that was not really expressed. Sure, there's trolls, but surely it's 2016. We've had the internet a while. There are people that have grown up never knowing what it's like not to have the internet. Surely by now our culture understands what trolling is. But Ghostbusters, its marketing was predicated on baiting trolls. You want to know why Leslie Jones got abuse? It's because she got tied to a feminist narrative to protect a film from criticism, and because she played a god-awful racial stereotype. And then she advertised her vulnerability, and the film advertised her vulnerability online. And then they complained about abuse. It's synergistic trolling, which I've gone on about in other videos. They baited the trolls, they got the trolls, they tried to use the trolls for marketing, the trolls won up to them. What did Milo do? He said it's best not to feed the trolls. He didn't say it in a particularly nice way or whatever. All he got was backlash. So he snapped back. Said a few rude things, retweeted a few rude things. So what? That's banter. I know people don't like that term, but that's really all it is. It's harmless. Block, ignore, make a friends list of people that you mutually follow. Just let it die down. No, they decided to feed the trolls. He didn't direct abuse. Retweeting someone who says something stupid, that's not telling people to go after them. And you've got to keep in mind that this kind of shit happens the other way all the time. People retweet stuff they find contentious that people on the right wing say all the time, or anyone that disagrees in any way, and they unleash the hounds. This is a tactic. It's called calling out. It's called calling out when it's someone you like doing it. It's called sea lioning when it's someone you don't like doing it. It's rank hypocrisy, right? People disagree on stuff. There are always going to be trolls, but disagreement, that's not harassment. And you can't hold someone accountable for what other people individually decide to do. It's just not kosher. What surprises me about Roosh is that he seems to be a true believer. Unlike Milo, he appears to be, at least to some extent, convinced of the truth of what he's saying. He's bitter and vindictive, convinced of his own victimhood, as a self-made blogger who was never given his due by the mainstream media. He tells me that the reason I have a column is that I'm a useful idiot and all my readers have low IQs. I ask him if he's negging me. Now, this is the section that made me decide to reply to this, to record a video about this article, an overly long video that hardly anyone is going to watch. But just, Laurie comes so very, very close to self-awareness at this point in the article. When she says, here's a true believer, even though he believes something ridiculous, she could be describing herself. When she talks about how he's convinced of his own victimhood, she could be talking about herself. It's so close. She could almost see herself through the eyes of someone else. But it just doesn't quite happen, and that's so frustrating. Because Laurie is a true believer, convinced of her own victimhood, believing something ridiculous. And she doesn't understand that the view that she has of Roosh is the view that other people hold of her. And if she could just grasp that, I think there might be some progress. The most widely accepted definition of a troll is a provocateur, someone who says outrageous, extreme or abusive things to elicit a reaction in an imagined audience. For them, the reaction itself is the win. That doesn't cover the various subspecies of troll in this well-catered goblin market. The key distinction at this convention, and among the petty demagogues here assembled, is between the attention hustlers, the pure troll howlers, who play this grotesque game for its own sake and their own, and the true believers. Roosh is a true believer, and that puts him at a disadvantage. And another moment of frustratingly close proximity to self-awareness. You're a true believer, Laurie, and that puts you at a disadvantage. It also means you're not a troll, and Roosh is not a troll, because you both believe in what you're saying, but you do elicit reactions. But a lot of the reactions that you elicit are trolls, people who don't believe what they're saying when they react to you. They're just going for the most outrageous thing. The definition of a troll is someone who insincerely says something outrageous or provocative in order to elicit a reaction. So if you're saying something that's outrageous or provocative, but you believe it, you're not a troll. You're something else entirely. Now, the problem, the thing that is fucking up our discourse, is that you seem to be incapable of telling the difference. And you lump in people who have genuine criticisms and concerns with trolls as a way to dismiss them. Just as how the Ghostbusters marketing team lumped legitimate criticism in with trolling so they could write the whole lot off as misogyny, which has led to this backlash. You need to be open to criticism and discussion. If I can have a discussion with a far-right extremist politely and respectfully and disagree, then surely I can do the same with you, Laurie, and surely other people can do the same with you, and you can do the same with them. But no, you can't. You have your safe spaces, your block lists. You can't tell the difference between trolls and critics. And that's why people like Milo and that outmaneuver you. Like Trump, and like a lot of successful politicians in this postmodern circus, they channel their own narcissism to give voice to the wordless, formless rage of the people neoliberalism left behind. They offer new win conditions for the humiliated masses. Welcome to the scream room. There's a cheese plate. It's not just neoliberalism that left people behind, though, is it, Laurie? Who created this postmodern landscape? Your left. My left. We've parted company. We stopped dealing with people. We stopped addressing people's problems, and we stood in judgment over people. Well, I didn't. When I say we, I'm talking about the left as a political entity. We started treating people like shit. If you were worried about your situation and expressed concerns about the things that you felt were putting pressure on it, we called you racist. If your problems went unaddressed, we called you sexist. We didn't deal with the problems. We didn't listen to the problems. We didn't offer solutions to the problems. We refused to even have the conversations, and so we completely ceded that ground to this new right. So if you want to cast blame about, you can't just level it at Trump or Milo or Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage. You have to look a bit closer to home. If you abandoned your duties, you abandoned a whole swathe of people to concentrate on the Guardianista, guilt-ridden middle class. Little wonder then that they turn to the alternative, the one that pretends at least to address their problems and their issues. And who can blame them? At least someone saying the right things. I've never understood this game. That's why I've always refused to debate Milo in public. Not because I'm frightened I'll lose, but because I know I'll lose. Because I care and he doesn't, and that means he's already won. help and forgive me, but I actually believe human beings can be better than this. That's not the only reason you'll lose. I mean, I don't know what precisely you would debate, but in amongst all the bluster and the winding people up and everything else, Milo does have good points, even if he doesn't actually believe them. You know, when he talks about statistics, when he talks about things like the wage gap, he's right. You know, these things are true. When he talks about the value of free speech, even if he doesn't believe in it, it does have value, and that appeals to people. And your counter-arguments are wanting. That's why you lose. Not because he doesn't care, but because your viewpoints do not have any solidity to them. You see, if you can't make a positive, genuine, true argument in favour of these positions, why are you holding them? You know, ideas should stand and fall on their own merits. If you debate Milo and make your points in an effective way, then you win the argument. You know, sure, he's a preening, whatever. But look at what happened with the creationist debate that Science Guy did. I can't remember who he was debating, but, you know, it was a big thing on television, and, you know, it was live streamed and all the rest of it. Lots of people have cautioned for a very long time not to debate with creationists. And that was the received wisdom. You know, you don't want to give them the oxygen of publicity or whatever. But it went brilliantly for the anti-creationists, because he could just walk right over him. You just got to have the right approach. If your ideas are sound and solid and good, then they'll win, regardless, because they're true. Your ideas often are not true, and that's why you'll lose. You're unwilling to test them in the crucible of debate. You're unwilling to have them examined. You're unwilling to have them challenged. That's why you block, ignore, and hide away from people, from genuine critics, not trolls, because they do not stand up to scrutiny. And surely people across the political spectrum should want to know that the things they believe are true and accurate. How can you solve problems with inaccurate information? How can you propose solutions that aren't true? They're not going to work, are they? So you want to know that they are accurate and true and that they work. So why not do it? Okay, not Milo, someone else. Someone more respectful and traditional, or whatever. Have the debate. But you won't. And you'll silence people even from expressing different points of views on universities, or even on social media. You just want to shut it all down, all opposition. That's not how you determine a good idea. It just isn't. Geert Wilders is also a true believer. I'm introduced to the Euro-fascist and his dead badger hair by a genial young Dutchman I met earlier on Tinder. He tells Wilders that I'm a left-wing journalist, and Wilders does not alter his tone of voice as he turns to me and starts vaguely explaining how the whole of France is about to be abolished and replaced with a giant halal kebab. Okay, racists are ridiculous. No doubt about it. Islam is not ridiculous. And what alternative are we offering to this introverted, nationalistic, right-wing point of view? None. We refuse to have the debate. We refuse to criticise Islam, even though Islam is unquestionably misogynistic, violent, unreformed, nasty, even though its beliefs are horrendous. And even moderate Muslims very often hold disgusting views about LGBT people and so on. We refuse to address it. The very people who claim to be interested in women's rights, LGBT rights and so on, refuse to stand in judgment over Islam. So again, we cede the ground to the right-wing nationalists to have their say freely. We refuse to debate them, refuse to allow them exposure, and so it just goes. We don't offer alternatives. So they get free rein. It's not helpful, it's not productive. If our ideas are better and more accurate, they will win, because they're true. But we won't do it. And that's why these things have gone as they have. Milo's speech is cabaret from start to finish. He sachets up to the podium and strips off his bulletproof vest, giddy with the attention, and announces that he's been banned from Twitter. The news draws cheers from the assembled Gamergate goons, whose masculinity is so fragile that they believe the new Ghostbusters film to be an active identity threat. And you wonder why he's so popular with these people. You never bothered to properly look into Gamergate. You never bothered to properly look into why people were upset with the Ghostbusters film. You know, you immediately pin it on fragile masculinity. Gamergate was about free expression in video games, again under threat after violence in Germany, and about corruption in games media, you know, which is worth hundreds of billions of dollars globally. You know, there were real problems. It's true that there were problems, but nobody paid any attention. Ghostbusters, people's concerns were the effects, that it was a cheap, horrible premise, that it was trampling on the quality of the original. And box office and so on, despite people's pleas to the contrary, seemed to show that it was not the great big tentpole blockbuster that people wanted it to be, despite all this bluster about any criticism being misogyny. But you never listened, you never tried, you never bothered to have an honest look at what was going on. You just jumped straight to your narrative. And then now you wonder why someone who actually gave them a fair shake is popular and is reaping the benefits of that. It's your fault. It's your own damn fault. What's happening to this country has happened before in other nations, in other anxious, violent times when all the old certainties peeled away and maniacs took the wheel. It's what happens when weaponized insincerity is applied to structured ignorance. Donald Trump is the Gordon Gekko of the attention economy, but even he is no longer in control. This culture war is being run in bad faith by bad actors who are running way off script, and it's barely begun, and there's going to be a lot of refugees. But what you don't understand, Laurie, is that that same problem exists on the other side of the argument. There are true believers on the side that you decry. There are true believers on the side that you support. There are also fakes and narcissists and people who are using these things for their own ends. There are people who are divorced from reality. It used to be that you could say reality has a left-wing bias. Not anymore. Both sides of the political spectrum are equally irrational at their extremes, not even necessarily at their extremes. Your side, our side, has contributed to this atmosphere with its postmodernism, saying, yeah, all things are equally true. That's not true. You know, we have cook statistics because we believe the ends justifies the means. It doesn't. What's true is what we need to know. We've abandoned people to the right because we look down on them. Well, I don't. You know, I'm still saying we in terms of the left as a whole. You know, we've abandoned the working class, we've abandoned the underclass, we look down on people, we call them names, we call them sexist, we call them racist, we call them misogynistic, we call them homophobic. We don't attempt to understand, explain, guide, or lead. And because we abdicate this ground, because we refuse to have the conversation, people like this step in and they have the conversation. And even if they don't believe it, they tap into it. All this resentment, all this unexpressed thought, and they take it down a very dark path. So we, on the left, are complicit in this. We have created this situation. Political correctness has created this situation because there is no safety valve. You can't express controversial views. You can't discuss controversial views. You can't have those controversial views challenged. You can't modify them. You can't be exposed to new information. This tribalism. There's value to being able to block and ignore people, but it creates bubbles. Little echo chambers that just spin out of control. And it's mostly the left that hides away in these little echo chambers and then is surprised when things don't go the way they want or the way they predict. You know, Trump has a genuine chance at the US presidency, which is terrifying. Brexit should never have happened, but it did. Because we refused to have the conversations. We refused to sell people on the idea of free movement and immigration. We didn't talk up the positives of Europe. We talked up fear and we talked down to people. And we refused to have those important conversations about Islam, about immigration. And that's where it all went wrong. So Laurie, you're not going to see this, but what the fuck? I'm going to talk as if you're listening. Laurie, please try to understand that you're the mirror image of Roosh. You're the mirror universe Roosh with the same flaws and problems. Both you and Roosh have abandoned rationality, have abandoned reason. You're just convinced of your own rightness and you're convinced of your own victimhood. Each of you have some points upon which you maybe are correct. But the only way you're going to struggle back to any kind of relevance or sanity is to apply reason. But you won't, will you? You'll continue to abuse people who disagree with you or shut them out. You won't countenance anyone with a different point of view. You won't discuss with anyone with a different point of view. You're unwilling to expose your ideas to scrutiny. And that's how we've ended up where we are. And it's not going to get better without some kind of shock. And that leaves people like me wondering, is it better to just tear it all down and start over? Is it better to have Trump destroy the American political system so that they can rebuild? We're screwed because our system works differently. We're just fucked for the next probably decade at least. But maybe the whole system needs tearing down. Maybe that's the only way to fix it. How can we get reasoned debate back? We can't without people reaching out. And that's why I had my discussion with a white nationalist. Because that's what I want other people to do. I want Laurie and Milo to have their debates. I want other people to talk. Because if we don't talk, what's the alternative to talking? I'll leave that as an exercise for the listener. If you made it all the way through to the end of this, thanks for listening. I'll leave links to the full article below so that you can read everything in its full context and so on. There wasn't much point reading the whole thing. Alright, take care. I've got other real work to do. Ciao. If you like what I do here, please like, subscribe. You can find me on social media on Twitter at Grimachu, James Desborough on Facebook, James Grim Desborough on G+. My main website is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com. If you want to help me out with a little money, which will go to support my games, writing and other projects, you can do so at Patreon, which is also Grimachu.